Howdy. So I'm interviewing Hansine Willoughby. She grew up in Lake Tahoe, Washington, not Lake Tahoe, California, lives in Olympia, Washington, and is currently a junior at Moody Bible Institute in Spokane, Washington. She's done missions work in Greece, working with refugees, as well as studied abroad in Greece. So now we're going to talk about that missions work that you've done. So what areas and for how long have you served in the missions field? And were you serving under an agency, or were you serving more just alone?
Yeah, so I was on the island of Lesbos in Greece. It's right off the coast of Turkey. I was there for almost 3 months, starting in January. So it went January to the end of March. And yeah, I was with the organization Operation Mobilization while I was over there. And they were kind of under the Greek organization Euro Relief, which is like an umbrella organization for all the Christian organization groups that are working there.
Awesome. And what made you want to go and serve in Greece and do that missions work there?
Yeah, so I heard of the crisis when I was on study abroad. We encountered a lot of the refugees throughout Athens and just during our time in Greece. And we actually got to go to Lesbos for 2 days during our ministry week in downtown Athens. And that's when we saw this really chaotic scene and really tragic scene happening on Lesbos of just an overwhelming amount of refugees that were stuck there, or that were arriving there and being processed and then moving on. And we just realized there's a huge shortage of volunteers to help things run and help distribution and just run the camps and stuff. So when I got back from study abroad, I started planning with my friend Matt Van Wyhe that we would go back and take a group of students to go and just spend our time there, just give a little bit of our time, hoping to bring, or at least ease the burden, I guess, is the best way to put it. And then I ended up staying 2 months. So that happened. It was great.
And then, is this the kind of missionary work that you want to do in the future, or do you want to do something else? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, no, I loved it. It was total confirmation that it was what I like doing and what I was passionate about. I don't know if I'd go back to Lesbos for mission work because it's the scene changes with the crisis, and but I'd definitely be interested in working with refugees. Hopefully somewhere more long term, so somewhere like Germany or Sweden, or so it's really anywhere in Europe where the refugees are, so that I can be more invested in the relationships that I build and stuff. That it's not so temporary, but is much more with the long term in mind. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to help the refugees once they've gotten somewhere that they can call home again. You don't want to help them get there?
Yes, yeah, I'd really like to help them assimilate to the culture, teach them English, teach them whatever it takes to help them adjust to the new country that they're living in.
Sweet. And what resources, so books or mentors or classes that you may have taken, what different resources gave you that passion and prepared you for the missions work that you were doing?
Yeah, honestly, Moody Bible Institute had a huge part in it. My freshman year, I was in a class called Christian Missions with Mike Klontz, and one of his projects was to write this big project paper thing called Missions for Me, and it was basically you pick a ministry in a country and an organization and plan out this whole 3-year thing. And I did mine on helping Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and that was kind of the Kickstarter, I think. From then on, it was always kind of in the back of my head. I had researched a lot about it, and opportunities just kept coming up over and over. So when I got to Greece and there were refugees, I was like, this is perfect. So that class definitely was a Kickstarter. And then I read a couple different books. First one was Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, which really ignited this passion for working with Muslims and specifically. And there's another book, it's called son of Hamas, and that was a little bit different, but still gave me a lot of understanding to Muslim culture and just helped to confirm this desire in me to work with Muslims.
Okay. And would you recommend those resources to other people who are passionate about the missions field? Like, do you think they should go and study somewhere like Moody?
Yes. Yeah. I highly recommend getting a Bible education before going out there, because in my field of work, in the time that I was in Greece, it came in so handy to know the Bible well and to be able to talk about the gospel and talk about topics that you don't just get just by doing a daily Devo. So my Moody education definitely came in in use when I was over there. So yeah, I'd highly recommend that. And then just reading about stories of Muslims coming to faith in Christ. That was really helpful too in understanding their like the process that they go through and the questions they wrestle with, like completely switching mindsets towards the Bible and towards Jesus. Is really an interesting process to read about and very helpful in understanding where a lot of Muslims would be coming from when you start talking about Jesus.
Yeah. And in the 2 months that you were in Greece working, did you see any big changes in the society or the Christian community there as people were filtering in and out of Lesbos?
I don't know about big changes. It would change pretty frequently and regularly, just because volunteers do normally just stay for 2 weeks at a time. So every 2 weeks you get a new batch of people, and skill levels vary and ministry levels vary. And so I guess just the little details change, but we're pretty good. There are regular people there that live there full time that are kind of, their job is to orient them and get them caught up, get the new volunteers caught up to speed. So we kind of stay on the same track with the same mindset and same heart throughout the time, despite all the changes in volunteers.
Okay. And what was your job while you were there serving?
I had a couple of different jobs. When my team left, I started out as a clothing tent manager of the main clothing distribution point at the main refugee camp on the island. And it was very stressful, and I was admittedly not very good at it. So there came a time when I was given the opportunity to step down, and I did that, and then was kind of the, I guess, guinea pig would be the best way to say it, guinea pig for new ministry ideas to reach out to the refugees. So my team would brainstorm about things we could do to engage in conversation or somehow minister to the refugees staying on the island. And then I was kind of like all right, let's see how this works. And like the tester for a couple new ideas.
All right. And while you were there, did you like experience anything miraculous or like see God working in just crazy cool ways?
Yeah, the whole time.
Like, do you have any stories?
Yeah, so the first time I saw that happen was actually right when I became the manager of the clothing tent, and it was really like building this job from the ground up, because Samaritan's Purse was just passing it off, and I feel like they kind of wanted to see us not succeed, so they didn't really give us a lot to work with. They basically threw it at us and watched us flounder, and I floundered. So we first got the clothing tent, and I didn't know how to run it, didn't know who to order supplies from. It was very poorly organized, all this stuff. It was a wreck. And so that first day, what the main thing that we needed was men's pants and shoes, and we were completely out of them. And there's like, I didn't have anybody to call, and like drop-off times were between like 9 and 11, and then 4 and 6 in the evening. So it was already like, I think 9 o'clock at this point, but to call somebody and then have them bring it in, that would take a couple hours. So we weren't going to get any new clothes for the day. And I was like, man, like we don't have anything that they're going to need. So this is going to be a rough day. And then half an hour after showing up, this van rolls up with 8 boxes of pants and a couple boxes of shoes, and nobody had ordered them, but he was just like, hey, do you guys happen to need pants and shoes? And we're like, yes, we do. So we were like fully stocked for that day. And then we got his contact information, and he became one of our main suppliers for clothing.
Nice. And were a lot of the people that you were working with then Christians, or just people who wanted to come and volunteer and help?
With Eurorelief, so our shifts were all through Eurorelief, and every volunteer that came through Eurorelief was Christian, I guess. But there were also, 60 plus other organizations that were working in the camps too, and all around the island. So there are plenty of non-Christians. I think they said like only, maybe about 10% of the volunteers were Christians. So the vast majority were non-Christians, which was awesome. But everybody that I specifically worked with on my shifts were because we're all with Eurorelief.
Okay. And did you see like an increased need for Christians there, or just an increased need for people who wanted to come and help?
I would say both, although I don't actually know how to answer that question. It never hurts to have Christians there. Let's just say that. Yeah.
All right. And as we're going forward into the future, what are some things that you think the church in Lesbos and the people in Lesbos need prayer for?
Yeah, they just need prayer for, I guess, being sustained and provision for them and encouragement. I think the local church in Lesbos is not huge. There's only one evangelical church there, and it's pretty tiny. The services were always packed with the volunteers and stuff, but not too many Lesbos natives were evangelical. So I think prayer, just that they continue in their faith and grow in it and don't burn out, I guess, with everything that's happening. And they stay strong and continue reaching out and continue making a difference, and reaching out to all the other Greeks that are, Eastern Orthodox, and I guess just continue the, I don't want to say fight, but just continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were working with a lot of Muslims there, and Muslims in today's world are often put in like a pretty bad reputation. Were there any dangers to being an open Christian working with them while you were in Greece, or was that not really a thing?
Yeah, I never felt threatened ever, and I think part of that is because they relied on us for what we were distributing. But the other part was that we did show them kindness, and we took the time to talk with them and sit with them and provide as much as we could for their needs. I know there were Christians among the refugees that got persecuted and were beaten a couple of times and often had their stuff stolen. So Christians are definitely persecuted among the refugees, but not particularly the volunteers. I never once felt unsafe or that I was in danger because I was a Christian. And actually, there were surprisingly a lot of them that wanted to talk about their faith and wanted to know about Christianity.
Okay, awesome. And while you were there, what was like the most effective way to evangelize to those Muslims? What did you think the most effective tool was?
Honestly, I think it was just engaging in conversation, because, well, okay, let me start over. So it was helpful that we were actually physically doing something. We were providing for need. We were distributing clothes and tea, and then after that, after they see that like we love them and we want to take care of them, then that opens up for conversation. So having the two paired, like task oriented and people oriented, having those two things combined was really, really helpful, because there were a couple guys that were so confused as to why we were helping, why we were spending our time there, why we were giving them clothes and feeding them and stuff. They're just like, I don't understand why you would do this. And we're like, Jesus, Jesus loves you. We love you. We want to take care of you. Then they're like, we don't know that much about Jesus. Like, and it just opens up this conversation of talking about Jesus the way that they understand him from the Quran, and then talking about Jesus the way we understand him from the Bible and the gospel, the truth of the gospel from the Bible.
I had a friend who actually went and worked with refugees a few years ago down in the Middle East, and he said that like one way that he would evangelize to them, or one way that he had heard of evangelizing to them, was that they would get a dream where they would see like a vision of Jesus or something. Did you see any cases of that where it was something where they might dream about Christianity or dream about Jesus and then come seek you out?
Yeah, there were a couple times, not specifically with me, with one person I encountered when I started talking about Jesus. They're like, "Oh yeah, I think," they said, "Yeah, he came to me in a dream," and they didn't come to faith, but they knew about Jesus and they wanted to know more because of the dream. But there are a couple other cases where, yeah, these guys came up to the volunteers and they're like, "We want to change religions," and the guys are like, "Oh, okay." So directed him to this like pastor kind of figure guy. He basically shared the whole gospel, and they're like, "Yeah, we accept that." And so there are doors like that. Dreams and visions are very, very common among the Muslim people, for opening that door and starting that conversation.
Awesome. And so you were working more with the Muslim culture in Greece, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what were aspects of that culture that were different maybe than our culture, and aspects of their religion that are different than ours?
Yeah. Wow. I love their culture. They're very generous and friendly and I guess relational. Yeah.
Okay.
So like hanging out with them, if they're like, "Oh, coming out with us," literally it's like either standing in a circle and talking or sitting in the tent and talking, and you don't have to be doing something that they don't pull out a pack of cards and they're like, "Oh man, we have to be doing something," and you can sit in silence and it won't be awkward because you're literally just sharing your presence with them. And tea was involved with everything. You would always have a cup of tea. Like if you're gonna hang out with your Muslim friends, the refugee friends, you're gonna have a cup of tea or five. So they always shared food too. Whatever food they had, they would share it among the group. And that was just their way of being like, "You're my friend. Um, welcome to like the circle, I guess. Here's some trail mix," you know. So everybody shares the same food, and we all have tea together, and really it's just very conversational, and family is pretty highly regarded. So it's very common to ask about family and talk about your family. And yeah, I think it's very much more relaxed and kind of more intentional than this American culture where we're like, "Oh, we got to go do something. Let's hang out. Okay, let's go for a hike. Let's run around, blah, blah, blah." You always have to be talking, like silence is awkward. And for them, it's just the complete opposite. You sit around and you can be quiet and you could talk, drink tea. It's just very relaxed and yeah, very different.
And you said that they're like fairly close knit in their families. Is that like father, son, mother, daughter, or is it extended family too? Like, do all the cousins and grandparents and all that come hang out, or is it more just a tight knit, like, close family unit?
Yeah, so I'd say it's extended. It includes extended family. There, I went to this girl invited me to her tent, and she had um, her sisters there, her sister's husbands there, her parents there, her grandparents. Like everybody in her family is her best friend, her best friend's family. Everybody's crammed into this little tent, and yeah, they all seem. I mean, they're traveling together. They managed to stick together across the water and now on Lesbos. So yeah, I definitely say it includes extended family.
And do you think that any parts of that culture might be specifically because they're refugees currently, or do you think it's also just a part of the culture that they grew up in?
Yeah, I think a large part of sticking together does have to do with the fact that they're refugees, but I also think that's not super foreign in their home culture. Like if they're back in Syria, I am sure that they would still be as tight with their family there.
Okay. And you said that you've considered doing missions work with refugees still, but outside of Greece.
Hmm.
have you considered doing anything outside of refugee work? And if so, what would that be?
Yeah, I am gonna trust the Lord, and really I'll do whatever He leads me to and
Okay.
whatever He asks me to. I know He's definitely given me a heart for refugees and for this Muslim ministry, but if it's something else, then I am sure my heart will change about it. So, yeah, I have not really looked into too much apart from working with refugees besides building up the body of Christ wherever I go, like wherever I end up, as in addition to working with the refugees. But yeah, that's kind of been the main deal right now.
All right. And what's your like short-term plan for the future? Are you going to go back to school or go back and work more with refugees, or where do you see yourself
Yeah,
going
so I'll
in the next
finish.
few years?
Yeah, so for the next 2 years, I think I can speak for pretty well. I do plan on going back to school in the fall, and doing a full year at Moody, and then the following fall, hopefully I'll go to Germany for a couple of months to continue working with refugees, and do my internship for school. Then I'll finish up school my last semester in the spring of 2018 and graduate, and then it's all up in the air. I don't know what's happening after that.
Awesome. So now we're going to rewind a little bit. And just wondering, did you grow up in a Christian or a non-Christian household?
I would say I grew up in a Christian household. My parents were divorced when I was very young, and my dad wasn't really Christian, but my mom came to Christ pretty shortly after the divorce and put my sister and I in this little youth group that where we first heard the gospel and memorized Bible verses and sang songs and stuff. So from then on, we almost regularly went to church, but I would definitely have considered it a Christian household from that point on.
All right. And how old were you when you started going to that youth group and when you first made your decision to follow Christ?
I couldn't tell you how old I first was. I think I must have been 5 or 6, and then I was baptized when I was 7, and that's the point when I was like, "This is what I believe. I believe the gospel." I guess, yeah.
And what led you to make that decision as a little 5-year-old?
I think it was the fear of hell. Really,
Okay.
I heard that if I died and believed in Jesus, then I'd go to heaven, and that was what I was like. Okay, yeah, I don't want to go to hell, so I don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah. When I was younger, my brothers were afraid of me going to hell, so
Yeah,
they made me get saved.
gets them every time.
So, growing up in the church and in that household, what were some major influences on your life that led you to come to Moody and then, like, gave you a passion for missions?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but I really was into aviation all through middle school and high school. I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy and fly. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, maybe I'd do something mission related. I don't know. And then I went to this Bible camp after my junior year of high school. And there were some pastors there that were really wise, and they just spoke truth in my life. And God changed my heart about the Air Force Academy and made me realize that I'm not a feminist, so it's a man's job to be in the military. And as a woman of God, like as a Christian, like there's a role that God has given me as a woman of a follower of Jesus. So yeah, God just changed my heart, and I gave up the Air Force Academy dream. And my mom found missionary aviation as a major, and I was like, that is the most perfect thing I've ever heard of. And we visited Moody Bible Institute, Spokane, and I love the campus and community and the AVE program. So that was the only place I applied to Moody, got in, and then ended up switching my major after my first semester from aviation.
And what's your major now?
My major now is intercultural studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you plan on using intercultural studies out in the field with other cultures?
I think I'm gonna work with other cultures. So, so yeah, it's been super helpful actually with the intercultural communication, studying culture and why people are the way they are, and how, like, what aspect of my life personally is cultural, and then um, kind of getting a more global view of humanity in general, like how people think and how people behave and do life in other cultures apart from my own. And so, like, I think it's going to equip me for being overseas and living overseas, because I won't have this worldview that is just relative to American life. And so intercultural studies is going to help me understand the world and understand people all over the world and not just in America.
Okay. And so you have an obvious passion for people who are struggling and people who are refugees. And how do you see God using that passion for his glory in the future?
Man, well, hopefully I'll be working with refugees, and hopefully, actually, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of Moody students in Spokane become interested in working with refugees too. So hopefully just building up this love for refugees and for Muslims, where our culture kind of tells us to be afraid and to um, lock ourselves in and be hesitant to reach out to refugees, because they're dangerous and they're a hazard to us, which is totally not true. So hopefully this passion that I've been given really helps to open up the church to the prospect of just like seeing the harvest that is refugees, that they are coming to a knowledge of Christ, and they're not to be feared, but they're very responsive to the love of Christ, and they're being changed. So I hope that this passion in me, like, lets others see that and lets others share in this passion for loving on them as well. That I'm not the only one that cares, but that the body of Christ can come together and be hands and feet that are showing his love and are living out the gospel every day, with the hopes of seeing refugees come to the Lord.
Okay, so out of everything that's going on in the world right now, with natural disasters and this refugee crisis, and then here in America we have an election, what would you say is the most important thing for Christians to be worried about right now, or to be focusing on? What should we
Honestly, I wouldn't say it's politics or anything. I think I really think we should align our hearts and our wills with Christ. And what did Christ come here to do? He came to seek and save the lost. And so that should be our goal in whatever we do. Like, you don't have to go overseas to talk about Jesus or share the love of Jesus with people. Like, there are lost people in America, and I think that should be our goal. Is that the politics, like, in the end, it doesn't matter. This world is very temporary. Say it really morbidly, we're all gonna die. Like, there are things that just don't matter in the view of eternity. So I think the church should take on a more eternal mindset and see the people that we interact with as eternal souls that have an eternal destination, and we have the truth that they're looking for, and we have the life that they're looking for. So the goal should be to show Christ to everybody that we encounter here, and then obviously that I don't know, the love that we have is unconditional, so it should go beyond our borders as well.
Awesome. And so you would say, like, no matter where you are, if you're planning on going into full-time ministry in the U.S. or working as a businessman in the United States or going as a missionary, no matter what, you're still in a missions field?
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. And with your specific missions field that you were in Greece, what needed to be met there, like physical needs, and then what spiritual needs needed to be met as well?
Yeah, so with the refugees, there's distribution of everything. So clothing and food were obviously the main things, or the first things, and then a lot of blankets, a lot of tents, flashlights, backpacks, baby baby stuff, so like bottles and milk and diapers and yeah, honestly everything, because they come across the water, and oftentimes the smugglers throw their bags into the sea, so they come off the boat with nothing but the clothes on their back, and that's it. So everything else, they kind of rely on volunteers and on organizations to provide for them, and it's just a different way of living, because you realize how much you actually don't need to live day to day. You really need like food and a shelter, and that's how they're living. So yeah, tents and blankets, clothes, food, I think were the main things. And then obviously there's a lot of medical needs over there that are being met, and then a lot that aren't as well. So there's a shortage of doctors. And I guess that would be another big need. Yeah.
Okay. And what's the weather and geography like in Greece? And how did that affect the needs of the people there?
Yeah, in the wintertime it was really, really cold. When we first got there, it was snowing. And freezing temperatures, very windy because it's an island out in the middle of the sea. So pretty regularly windy. Even when the months got warmer, we'd still have windstorms, and yeah, it'd rain pretty frequently, and there are mountains and a lot of mud. Yeah, but that's just the island.
Okay. And after the refugees moved through Lesbos, where were they going to next? And did you get to see any continuation of their journey?
Yeah, so they'd go from Lesbos, they'd hop on a ferry and ride it 10 hours to Athens, and then from Athens, be able to travel throughout Greece, and then the northern borders closed. So then everybody that arrived on Lesbos would eventually be stuck in Greece, almost basically no matter what, no matter the circumstance of their refugee status or whatever. But so yeah, they'd be in Athens, and a lot of camps are springing up all over Greece to try to house these people, and some are worse than others. But in general, like for the most part, refugees stay in these camps. Yeah.
And how would you recommend, or what would you recommend to a young person who's considering going into the missions field, like a high school student?
High school student. Well, what do you mean? Like
if they're trying to figure out a place maybe to go and serve, or trying to find out what God's calling them to do, what would you recommend for them as kind of a first step in the right direction?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I know when I was in high school, one of the most impactful trips, and it was very much a catalyst, was the good old Mexico mission trip. So you go down there, and that was kind of my first exposure to a new level of poverty that I have never seen before. And then really made me question everything that I have. Like, why do I have so much? Why do I have such a big house? Why do I have so much stuff? The importance of material things. So Mexico is a good first trip, because you don't go, it's not a huge commitment. You go down and it's very shocking, the poverty levels. But at the same time, like you do come back and have time to process and rethink everything before making a huge commitment like that, like going overseas. And then you just, I don't know, take bigger and longer trips, go further and further away from home, and voila.
Boom, you're a missionary.
Yep.
Do you have any other stories or little accounts of things that happened while you were in Greece that you want to share?
Are you looking for anything in particular, or?
Not really, just anything that you thought was awesome or cool or
Okay.
even funny. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I worked at a tea tent a couple of days, and this tea tent it's free tea, so it runs basically all day, morning to night. And there's like two people on shift, and it gets crazy because there were, I don't remember how many, probably like 3,000 refugees in camp at this time, and it was kind of cold, so everybody wants tea. Anyways, my friend and I were running this tea tent, and we're getting ready to open it up, and we realized like we were going to be so overwhelmed. And these two two refugee men, they volunteered to help us. They like asked us if we needed help, and we're like, yeah, I think we're gonna need help. So he started working with us. One was named Amir, and the other one was named Yasir. So Yasir and I were outside of the tea tent at the front, like right outside the door. I'm directly passing out tea and cookies to the refugees that would line up and kind of mob the front, but there's like a gate where they couldn't get past. We'd pass the tea over the gate, or like, yeah, fence, whatever. And so Yasir and I were passing, and Yasir didn't really speak English, and he was awesome. And Amir was in the tent, he was filling up cups, and then my other friend and my coworker, she was like brewing the tea on the big stoves in the back. And so Yasir and I were passing out, and it just got crazy. Like, there were so many little kids that would elbow their way to the front, and it'd just be madness. And so these kids they'd have the grabby hands. They'd like grab our arms and try to get all the tea. And we came to a point where like, we can't give the kids tea because they take the tea, they go, and then they come right back and get to the front again and want more tea. So we decided that we weren't going to give the kids tea. And Yasir, who's like, baby, no chai, baby, no chai. And so that's what we started to yell. There's so many kids, and it just became hilarious because we're yelling and all these people want tea, and the line is a mile long, and Amir is struggling to fill up the cups fast enough for us to pass out the tea. And so the whole time Yasir and I are just yelling, baby, no chai, baby, no chai, baby, no chai. Like trying to pass the tea over these kids that are like, they're like grabbing our arms and like trying to pull the tea out of our hands and stuff, and we're just trying to like pass it over their heads to the parents that are waiting behind them and to the adults that are waiting behind them. So it just became hilarious. And so by the time the adults would get up to the front of the line where they're going to get tea, everybody's just laughing and having a good old time because we're just yelling, and it was really, really fun. Yes, it was so nice. Like it was exhausting, but in the best way. I was never like, oh, there's too many people. It's just like, this is so great. Like, look how many people we get to interact with and give tea to, and yell baby no chai at the top of our lungs for like 3 hours. It was so much fun. But it was really cool to see how like so many refugees, like those two, Amir and Yasir, weren't the only ones that wanted to help us. There were a good number of refugees that would come and be like, do you need help? Do you need help? And it got to the point where like, like actually I think we don't, like we do, but we don't at the same time. So it was cool to see that they really just wanted something to do. They wanted to be useful, and they wanted to help out wherever they could. So it was just a really, really cool time.
And did you build any lasting relationships with any of the refugees, or
Mm-hmm.
is it pretty difficult to stay in contact with them?
Yeah, so it is difficult to stay in contact, but a lot of them have Facebook and stuff that makes it a little bit easier. I'm currently in contact with probably 3 or 4 refugees that I met there. One that I speak with regularly, and he and I had when I was there, he and I had a really long conversation comparing Islam and Christianity and the Bible and the Quran. So we formed this really good friendship. And it wasn't just that, like he talked about his family and asked about mine, and he sat with his friend group, and it was really, really fun. So he sends me updates on how things are going in the camp, and is just very appreciative for all that the volunteers are doing to help there, and is just kind of blown away by the fact that we did spend time, just like volunteered our time and whatever to be there and to help them out in any way that we could. So yeah, I do. It's hard to stay in contact because he doesn't have Wi-Fi all the time, and they travel around so much, and a lot changes really quickly for them, but it is possible.
Okay. And what about the Christians that you were working alongside while you were there? Did you build any relationships with them?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, yep. I message them every day. Yeah, the kind of community there is so cool because it's Christians from all over the world, like every country you can imagine. And culturally, we don't have very much in common, very many mutual interests or whatever, but we have Christ in common. And that ended up being so much and so meaningful, because every time, like I lived with some Christians from Germany and the Netherlands, and we had Christ in common. So every time was just a time of fellowship, and we'd get together and pray together and sing together and make dinner together. And so like it takes this international community, international body of Christ, and kind of creates its own culture. It creates this new culture within all these other cultures that are coming together and serving with the same mind and same spirit.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And do you have any plans for the near future for going and doing missions work, like something over the summer, or is your next big plan just going to be getting back to school in the fall?
Yeah, I wish I could say I was going back over the summer, but I have a summer job, so no. As of right now, I don't have any plans to go back, but we'll see. I'm really down for last minute plans, so who knows?
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much.